Okay, today we'll be talking about the excretory system, and this is found in section 30-4 in your textbook. It's about page 882, 83, I believe. So at the end of this section, you should know the structures and the function of the excretory system. You should know how the kidneys clean the blood, and you should also know how the kidneys maintain homeostasis. So a urine test or a urinalysis is very important, and it can tell a doctor your overall health. It can tell whether or not you have an infection, whether or not you may have an obstruction somewhere in your excretory system. You could have diabetes. It can tell if you have diabetes, kidney damage, liver damage, or whether or not you've taken illegal drugs. So when we're looking at the structures of the excretory system, their main purpose is to excrete metabolic waste from your body. Excrete metabolic waste from your body. And the organs that are involved in this would be the lungs, the skin, the liver, and the kidneys. Now, in addition to the kidneys, you have the ureters, the urinary bladder, and the urethra, which along with the kidneys, sometimes called the urinary system. But as far as the actual processing of it and being able to do the excretion, it's those four main ones up in the box there. So what exactly does the skin excrete? Well, you know that the skin excretes by sweating. So what is actually in that sweat? Well, in the sweat, you have salt, and you have a product called urea. Now, urea is made by the liver, and what the liver does is it turns nitrogen products, which are bad for you, nitrogenous waste, into urea and sends it to the kidneys. But the skin can also secrete that salt in urea. And I'm going to put sweat up here also. As far as the lungs, you should already know what the lungs excrete. What do they excrete that you don't need? That's right, carbon dioxide. And if you remember from cellular respiration, it also excretes a little bit of water vapor. Remember I told you before when you exhale and onto a mirror, that's why it fogs up. That's that little bit of water that's there. So here's a picture of a human kidney, and the purpose of the kidneys will be to remove waste. They also maintain homeostasis by regulating the pH, and homeostasis is also affected when they regulate the amount of water that is in your body, and that in turn regulates the volume of your blood. So there are three processes that the kidneys do, or can complete rather, to clean your blood. And that's filtration, reabsorption, and urine excretion. And here's a kidney. Let's look at the anatomy of the kidney real quick. So actually the outside of the kidney is called the renal capsule. Renal capsule. And then right inside from that outer covering you have what's called the renal cortex. Then in from there is the renal medulla. And then you have two main arteries that filter blood into the kidneys. And those, well, not artery, you have a renal artery and a renal vein. The renal artery carries blood into the kidney. The renal vein carries blood out of the kidney. And then you also have inside the renal medulla, you have what's called a nephron. So the nephron is inside of here. It's a little loop thing that you see in there. Then also you have that, I mentioned the renal artery, the renal vein. You also have what's called a ureter. That's the beige structure that you see right here. My pointer is there, or there's a dot moving. See that? Okay. Now we're mainly concerned with the nephron. The nephron is pretty important because that is what does everything for the kidney. There's a whole bunch of these nephrons in there, and their nephron is the functional unit of the kidney. That's what actually carries out the function, and it's located in the renal medulla. Now, if you see, notice it's a little bit darker red where the renal medulla is. That's because there's a lot of blood capillaries in there. Now, when we're looking at this nephron, there's a couple of parts you need to be aware of. So there's that renal vein and renal artery again. Then you have what's called the glomerulus, and that's a group of a tangle, I guess you could say, of blood capillaries. Then you have what's called Bowman's capsule. And then over here on the right where it says collecting duct, that's where the urine's going to collect. And then you have at the bottom there the loop of Henle. Now if you look closely at this picture that I have, the nephron is actually one long tube. And so it starts here, where I'll just put the X, and if you follow it all the way around, okay, it ends with the collecting duct. And so what happens here is things can get, they get filtered out in the glomerulus, and from there, so the blood comes in the renal artery. You see the arrows coming in here, right? Blood comes in the renal artery, and from there, the following things can get passed or filtered over to Bowman's capsule. So that'd be like the water can fit through there. And this is obviously due to osmotic pressure, but you have the water, urea, glucose, amino acids, salts, and even vitamins can get filtered over there to that Bowman's capsule. Now from there, they go into the tube. This would be the proximal tube up at the top here. This would be proximal. And over at the end would be distal. And down here is that loop of Henle. That's the bottom there. But as I was saying, they go over into that Bowman's capsule and then they go into the tube. Now, while they're in the tube, the things that your body needs can get filtered back in. And they come back in on the blue side here. Okay? So the things that will come back in will be things that your body needs. Like it needs the water. As a matter of fact, about 99% of the water will come back in. The glucose, the amino acids, the salts, and the vitamins. Now understand that there's no proteins and no blood cells should be going through that tube when they were in the glomerulus, because those are big molecules, and the only way that those things would go through was if there was a lot of blood pressure. So in other words, if a person had high blood pressure, then you might see some proteins in their urine. Okay, so they go over to the blue side, like on your picture. And then, so that's the reabsorption. So the filtering part happens in the glomerulus and goes into the Bowman's capsule. And then it goes through that tube, right? And once it gets into the tube, as I said, it can get reabsorbed back into the renal vein. Now the stuff that does not get reabsorbed, there might be a little bit of water and urea that doesn't get reabsorbed. And that's what adds or collects in this collecting duct. All right. This slide right here you have, and I gave it to you just to give you a general overview of what happens. Oops, wrong way. There we go. So how do the kidneys actually control the composition of blood? I kind of gave you a quick overview on it. But here, in case your notes weren't that great, here's another way to look at it. So blood will enter the kidney through the renal artery, as I said. And then the kidney will remove the urea, excess water, and any other waste products, and they pass them to the ureter. The clean, filtered blood goes into the renal vein and goes back into your blood circulation. So with filtration, because of high pressure, and we're talking about the blood pressure, blood flows into the glomerulus of the nephron. And if you didn't catch them, it's the water, glucose, vitamins, amino acids, protein waste products, salts, and ions pass into the Bowman's capsule. Now protein waste products, so that could be protein plasmas, I think is what it's called. Now the liquid that's forced into the U-shaped tubule, so at the top would be the proximal tubule, down would be the loop of Henle, and then towards the end obviously is distal. Proximal means close to, and the distal means away from. Oops, means away from. There we are. Get back there. Now most of the ions, water, and all the glucose are reabsorbed into the bloodstream. Okay. And the result will be that water is conserved, because remember I said 99% of the water will go back, and then homeostasis is maintained because the things that your body doesn't need are going to be excreted. So how is this urine excreted? Well, the liquid that remains, okay, so you have the water and some of that urea, that will flow out of the kidneys through the ureter. And then it collects in what some books call it the urinary bladder, but it's the bladder. And it stores there until your bladder is full or until you have the urge to urinate. And then it'll move out of the body through what's called the urethra. So it's kidney to the ureters, and you have two obviously because you have two kidneys, the bladder and then the urethra. So how does this maintain homeostasis? Well, first of all, wastes are removed from the blood. Okay. It also controls the level of sodium. Okay, because if there's too much sodium in there, your body will absorb more water and excrete more water along with the sodium. It can also regulate the pH because remember the acids are in there and bases are in there. And then also glucose is not filtered out. Okay, if glucose happens to be filtered out, that means that probably something is wrong. In other words, something is not working correctly. It's like a person might have diabetes. Okay. In class, we'll watch a short video that kind of goes over this one more time. Now, obviously, if a person has a problem where their kidneys are not functioning correctly, or they're damaged by injury or disease, they have basically two options. They can get a kidney transplant, or they can use what's called kidney dialysis. And what dialysis is a machine that filters your blood for you. So you're hooked up to the machine, kind of like with an IV, and your blood, instead of going like just through your body, it goes through that machine and then back into your body. So here's some questions that you can answer at the end of this. Okay. You might need to look these up if you're not sure. And I will stop it there. In class, if we have time, we will do the analyzing data section. And that's the end of this video.